Hola gente, volvemos en este caso con un episodio más para activistas. Recuerden que el material está ordenado en las listas de reproducción de acá del canal de YouTube y tenemos dos listas que son las centrales, que son videos para personas no veganas y videos para activistas, y en este caso vamos a volver a hacer un episodio para activistas y por eso lo primero que quiero preguntarles es si no están ya hartos de que les lea. Bueno, si les viene pasando eso, este episodio es para ustedes mucho mejor a los anteriores. Aunque quizás lo malo es que lo hagamos un poco extenso, pero vamos a ver un video que me parece que está buenísimo y que creo que es esencial que todos los activistas vean, y lo vi por segunda vez hace muy poquito y realmente quiero compartirlo con ustedes porque lo central que se viene a plantear tiene mucho, pero muchísimo de cierto, o al menos así lo veo yo. También tiene errores, pero es, a mi entender, el mejor análisis de por qué estamos como movimiento. Es decir, mal, estamos mal. Somos 2 personas cada 100 las que somos veganas, con suerte. Esto es malísimo, es una cifra malísima, chicos. Esta es la mejor charla que vi relacionada al activismo. Y como movimiento tenemos muchos problemas, pero el central es este, y ya lo hemos trabajado en otros episodios, como el de los problemas de las campañas monotemáticas y como el del costo de no promover veganismo, que voy a dejar acá arriba para que puedan ver. Lo digo una vez más, si sos activista, para mí tenés que ver este video. Pero no por mí ni por Francione, sino por los argumentos que se ponen sobre la mesa. Vamos entonces a ver el video, que es una conferencia dada por Gary Francione en el Vegan Fest de Asheville en 2017. Vamos a tener que verlo con los subtítulos automáticos, y lo poquito que sé de inglés y que detecte que esté equivocado también lo vamos a aclarar.
It is a great honor to welcome Gary Francione to the stage.
Talk about the abolitionist approach and what it means, or if you want to talk about a specific topic, you know, to talk about like what's wrong with welfare reform and single issue campaigns, we can do that too. I mean, I just don't know, you know, if you all know basically what the abolitionist approach is. I don't want to bore you to death. If you would like to talk, if you want to argue with me about, you know, I mean, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I mean, if you want to tell me that, you know, you think welfare reform is a good thing, that's fine. You're entitled. This is America. You have the right to be wrong. And you know, and so if you want however you want to do it, is fine with me. So can I just see a showing of hands? I mean, do you want to be interactive? Do you want to have discussion, or do you want me to talk to you about the abolitionist approach and what it means? How many want to be interactive? How many people want me to talk to you about the? Okay, fine. All right. Fair enough. All right, look.
Vamos a dejar acá igual también el enfoque abolicionista para que lo puedan ver. Pero menos mal que le pidieron que hable de este otro tema que hizo la charla realmente muy interesante.
All of the above. All right, well, I'll try to finish up. How long do I have? An hour? I have an hour, right? Okay, so I will try to finish up and get some questions from you. All right, look. We are killing in excess of 60 billion animals a year for food. A billion is 1,000 million. We're killing a trillion sea animals. A trillion is a million. So we are killing, it's a staggering number to put your head around. And there's an urgency, and I think this is having a really bad effect on us, because you can sort of think of it as all this animal stuff that we're eating, all of this pain and suffering that we're inflicting and internalizing is like a pill we take that anesthetizes us to violence. It normalizes violence. We've become very desensitized to violence. You know, we see it all over the place, and it doesn't even register for most people. And part of the reason for that is that we are sticking violence into our mouths 3 times a day. We're wearing violence on our bodies. We're tolerating all sorts of mindless violence. And so there's an urgency. Part of what concerns me about the movement, and I don't like calling it a movement because it's not really a social justice movement. We do not have a social justice movement, not yet. We're trying.
Bueno, hay explotaciones que no son violentas, así que me parece injusto centrarlo solo en ellas, ¿sí? Pero marcando esto, ahora sí vamos sobre el punto de que no tenemos un movimiento vegano, ¿sí? Que esto es lo que va a trabajar durante toda la conferencia.
Trying to build one, but we don't have one yet. What we have is a group of large, multi-million-dollar corporate charities. They have a very different incentive. I mean, they're not social justice groups. They're charities. They're promoting the vision that charities promote in order to get donations. We don't have a social justice movement for animals yet. As I say, we're trying to start one. But the social justice movement for animals is not going to be a matter of large organizations. It's going to be a matter of us as individuals doing things. That's how you change things. Things are not, the revolution will not be tax deductible. We're not going to change things through these organizations. We're going to change things because larger and larger numbers of us accept that animal exploitation is not morally justifiable, and we reject it, and we become vegan, and we educate others about veganism. And that's how, in 1985, I remember we had a big meeting in Washington, D.C., and all of the large groups were there, and there were actually many fewer of them than there are now, because there's 1 million of these groups. And but the groups, the major groups were there: the Animal Welfare Institute, HSUS, PETA, Fund for Animals. Groups were there, and we were all talking about whether we should support the 1985 amendments to the Animal Welfare Act. The Animal Welfare Act is the main piece of federal legislation which supposedly regulates the use of animals in biomedical research and some other purposes, but mostly biomedical research. And I remember, being the only person in the room who said, no, I wouldn't support this, because what this does is it says to people that we can regulate animal experimentation in an effective way. We can do it right. We can do the wrong thing the right way. This is the wrong message to send. And they said, well, what would you do? And I said, I would spend every minute of time, every penny of resource, every bit of labor, I would spend on promoting veganism, because as long as people are eating them, nothing changes. Once they stop eating them for ethical reasons, everything changes. I mean, look, think about it. Vegans don't go to SeaWorld. They don't go to circuses. They don't go to zoos. They don't buy fur. They don't, all these single issue campaigns are looking at the issue wrongly. We have to look at the big problem is we eat them 3 times a day. We wear them. They are a part of, exploitation is a part of the lives of normal people. As long as that's the case, nothing's ever going to change. Now, if it...
Bueno, acá no coincido con él. Podemos no comer animales y usarlos igual en otros aspectos de la vida, ¿sí? Pero eso no quita el eje central de la charla, que es lo que va a desarrollar más adelante, que es abarcar unos problemas por sobre otros.
In 1985, we had decided that what we were going to do was to promote veganism and not the amendments to the Animal Welfare Act and the anti-fur campaign and the pound seizure campaign and all of this nonsense. If we had done that in 1985, now in 2017, if we put all the billions, and I mean billions of dollars, from these organizations that have gone into all of these worthless campaigns for happy eggs and all of this nonsense, we'd have a vegan movement now. We'd have a significant vegan movement. We don't. We have a movement that largely focuses on treatment, talks about the treatment of animals and whether or not we can make it more humane. We do not have a movement that focuses on use, about whether the use of animals, however humane, is justifiable. That's the wrong way to think about this. It's not getting us anywhere. And we have, I believe, look, if we're ever going to change things, it's not going to be because you sit down and write a check to some organization in Washington, D.C. or Norfolk, Virginia, or any place like that. It's going to be because you take the responsibility. You, every one of you, take the responsibility. There are no leaders. There are only us. Each of us has to be a leader. If we're not, we're failing the animals.
Esto es lo central de esta charla. Vuelvo sobre lo anterior. Él dice que no deberíamos estar cuestionando campañas de un solo uso en las que la mayoría de la gente no está involucrada. Y bueno, esto tiene una razón, y es que a través de eso las organizaciones animalistas hegemónicas, ¿sí? Porque no todas, pero las hegemónicas lo hacen, perciben donaciones. Porque la mayoría de la gente no está involucrada en ir, por ejemplo, a Mundo Marino. La mayoría lo rechaza. Lo que no rechaza la mayoría es alimentarse en base a animales. Pero todo está posado sobre la misma lógica, que es ver a los animales como individuos que están en este mundo para satisfacernos, que tienen un valor instrumental. Y en eso es en lo que no estoy de acuerdo con él, pero sí estoy muy, muy de acuerdo, y pienso que esto es absolutamente cierto, con esto que está diciendo acá. No hay ni debe haber líderes en este movimiento. Cada uno de nosotros tiene que elevar este movimiento de justicia desde lo individual, comunicando el veganismo, simplemente, nada menos que ello.
You can't abrogate this responsibility to somebody else. You just can't. And so, if it's going to change, it's going to change because we as individuals, we work together, we work separately, we do whatever we can every single day. Because all of us have a sphere of influence. All of us have friends. All of us have family. All of us have contacts. We're in schools. We're working in various places. We all have people we can influence. And we don't tend to think of changing one person as an important thing. It's the most important thing that we can do. If each of us turns one person on in the next year, if we each turn one person on to veganism, and each of us does that every single year, the whole world will be vegan in 15, 20 years. Now, as I said yesterday, that ain't going to happen, unfortunately, but it could happen if we were out there working. And it's time that we stop being ashamed of saying, look, there's veganism.
¿Sabían eso, no? ¿Sabían que si realmente hacemos ver a una persona que la explotación animal es incorrecta y abandona toda explotación animal, deja de participar en ella y al mismo tiempo le comunica a otra persona, al cabo de unos 10, 15, como mucho 20 años, una sociedad sería vegana? ¿Lo tenemos claro eso? Eso es importante de saber. Es muy poco viéndolo de esa manera, desde la manera de la simple difusión del veganismo y nada más que ello. Y no importa en qué ciudad se haga esto, sino que esto debe suceder en nuestras áreas de influencia. Así estemos en una ciudad con 10 personas o en una con millones.
Or there's animal exploitation. It's not a question of I'm tired of this business that we shouldn't be clear with. I don't think we should ever be violent with people. I don't think it's helpful to be violent with people. I don't think it's helpful to be confrontational with people. But I think it's important to be clear with people that if they care about animals, if they think animals matter, they got to stop eating them, wearing them, using them. End of story. If they're not vegan, then they're participating directly in animal exploitation. Now, if they want to do that, that's their choice to do. But if they're eating them, wearing them, using them, it doesn't matter whether they're eating happy eggs. It doesn't matter whether they're reducitarians. It doesn't matter whether it's meatless Monday. All of this nonsense. They're participating in animal exploitation. We've got to be clear about that. I'm sick of this business that we don't use vegan. We use veg. We use VEG*N. We use all of these things. I mean, what's wrong? It's vegan. There's nothing. It's like, there's nothing wrong with it. Say it. Vegan. It's nothing wrong with it. Okay. And
Veganismo, fin de la explotación de los demás animales. Se usa mucho antiespecismo. No lo considero correcto y eso lo he dejado plasmado en otros episodios a través de otras lecturas, ¿sí? Veganismo, fin de la explotación de los demás animales. ¿Podemos hacer más por los demás animales? Sí, pero el punto de partida coherente para que hagamos más por los demás animales es no explotarlos. Veganismo es eso. No tenemos que esconder esta palabra.
And we've got to be clear about that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what I was talking about yesterday, which is namely, I think we should be taking the position that we ought to be advocating against the use of animals. It's really not a matter of how humanely animals are used. I mean, the reality is you can't feed the world with animal products without it being horribly violent. And I have been in many slaughterhouses in my life, and I have seen supposedly more humane.
Bueno, puede suceder y va a estar mal igual, ¿sí? puede suceder y es el avance en el que trabajan las industrias, en el bienestar animal. Pero sería incorrecta la utilización de otros individuos para beneficiarnos sin su consentimiento, ¿sí? Y ahora va a entrar en una de los mataderos que no estoy de acuerdo y se pone monotemático, pero bueno, es para generar un marco para lo que va a decir más adelante.
Slaughterhouses, and and I will tell you something. I've never seen one that isn't a hellhole. They are all terrible, terrible, terrible places. And so
repito, si no son terribles, están mal igual, ¿sí? Tengamos especial atención en esto.
This idea that we can do this, that we can kill animals in a humane way, that we can raise them and process them in a humane is nonsense. It's complete fantasy. There is no such thing as that. Okay? Because you're talking about large numbers of animals. I mean, killing is itself a violent act, and so it doesn't really matter how well it's done. And I think it's really important. The animal welfare ethic that we live with, that is dominant, that is the conventional wisdom of our culture, was formulated in the 19th century. And it basically took the position that animals don't have an interest in continuing to live. They only have an interest in not suffering because they're not self-aware. This is what Jeremy Bentham, the guy who is the many ways the most important person in the animal welfare movement, his position was animals they can suffer, so they matter, but they're different from us because they're not self-aware. And because they're not self-aware, are killing them and you are using them and killing them, that's okay because they're not self-aware. When we kill them, they don't know what they lose because they don't have a sense of their lives. Now you can say, well, 19th century, the guy was a jerk, whatever. Bottom line is the supposed father of the animal movement, Peter Singer, takes the exact same position. I mean, it is shocking to me the number of people who say, oh, animal liberation. Are you telling me that Peter Singer doesn't take an animal rights position? Read the book. If you have the book, read the book. And he basically he rejects rights. He's a utilitarian philosopher. He doesn't believe in rights as a philosophical matter, but he basically takes Bentham's position. He says animals have an interest in not suffering, but they're different from us cognitively because they don't have a sense of who they are. So they live in an eternal present. So when you kill them, they don't really know. I mean, they don't think about their lives the way we do. Next year I'm going here, and next month I'm going there. Yesterday I did that. They don't have this sense. They live in a sort of an eternal present. That's what Singer says. That is basically the position of the movement. The movement takes the position, by and large, that killing isn't the
Ahí traduce Singer como cantante, pero estaba hablando de Peter Singer. Después vamos a leer algún libro de él.
The problem. The problem is making them suffer. So the movement focuses on suffering. Okay? Movement focuses on ways to reduce suffering. That's why you have things like the reducitarian movement. That's why you have Meatless Monday, this sort of stuff. People say, well, isn't less suffering better? And the answer is, of course, less suffering is better. The problem is people who believe that animals have moral value ought not to be encouraging people to engage in the acts that supposedly, and I think there's a lot of doubt about this, but encouraging people to engage in the acts which are supposedly result in less suffering is a bad thing. It's like my saying, well, look, if I'm going to kill you, it's better that I kill you without torturing you. Isn't it? Yes, of course. Less suffering is better than more suffering. Okay, so is it all right for me to say it's all right to kill you as long as I don't torture you? And the answer is no. Less suffering is better than more suffering, but that doesn't mean we ought to normatively promote the supposedly less suffering option. And that's what the movement does. And they all do this. All of these large organizations do this. Every single one.
Todo el tiempo y no se logra nada, o lo que se logra es muy poco y con muchos años, cuando lo que podemos hacer es difundir veganismo. Basta con el sufrimiento. Realmente me parece que si hablamos del uso de los demás animales y hacemos comprender que eso es lo incorrecto, eso ya engloba el sufrimiento que está bajo la explotación de los demás animales, ¿sí? Se cae todo hablando de que es injusto usarlos. Se cae todo el sufrimiento también. Debemos priorizar hablar del uso.
There is not one large organization in this country that promotes veganism as a moral baseline. Not one. They all focus on treatment, and they all focus on supposedly reducing less suffering. Now, think about this for a second. In the 18th century, we recognized that human chattel slavery was a really bad idea, because we recognized that if humans are property, then they're never going to matter. They're never going to have any moral significance. Can you hear me okay this way? Okay. They're not going to have any moral significance if they are property, because slaves didn't have any moral value. Slaves were things that slave owners owned. So they only had the value that the slave owner accorded to them. And so we recognize that human beings, if they're going to matter morally, can't be property. Because to say that they're property is to take them out of the class of beings who matter morally. And so now nobody argues in favor of slavery. I mean, slavery still exists, but nobody says it's a good thing. As a matter of fact, slavery is one of the few things, chattel slavery is one of the few things which is outlawed in international law and is against the law of every nation in the world. Now, as I say, it exists. Nobody defends it. Why? Because we recognize it's a qualitatively different form of human rights violation. Because what you're doing when you're talking about slavery, you're not talking about whether a particular person is being treated equally or well or whatever. You're talking about taking those beings that are regarded as property outside of the moral and legal community altogether. They have no value. They are chattel. They are property. If animals are property. How many of y'all have companions that you live with, non-human companions? Okay? All right. We all love them. We all regard them as members of our family. And we're allowed to do that. You know why? Because they're your property. They're no different from your car. If you have a car and you want to wax it once a week or twice a week, you want to change the oil every 3 weeks, whatever, you can do that. It's your property. You can you can decide that you're going to fetishize your car, and you can you can invest a lot of money and energy into your car because it's your property. Same thing with your dog, your cat, your rabbit, whoever it is that you live with. They're your property. But the converse of that is, if you go home tonight and say, you know what, I'm tired of taking care of my dogs. You can take your dog to a kill shelter, dump them, and say, I don't want to deal with them anymore. You can't find him a home, you can kill them. They're your property. You can value them high, you can value them low. Animals are property. They have no intrinsic or inherent value. They only have the value that we, as property owners, accord to them. Now, if you have animals that you love, you accord a higher value. If you have animals that you use as guard dogs or as cats to catch mice in your little convenience store or whatever, you can value them low. If you're a farmer, you basically value them at the level you need to value them. You protect their interests to the extent you have to protect their interests in order to bring them to market in an economically efficient way. That's how it works. It's really quite simple. It's economics 101. Animals are property. If they're ever going to matter, they got to stop being property. They're never going to matter. As long as they're property, they're never going to matter morally, ever. So they've got to stop being property. We've got to accord them the right not to be property. Now, that is not, in the first instance, going to be a matter of the law, where the law is going to recognize that animals have a right. The law lags behind. As I said yesterday, the law does not lead, the law follows. So it's only going to be when there's a social movement, it's going to be like with slavery. There were a lot of people who believed that human chattel slavery was wrong. And eventually, it resulted, in part, in a civil war, which resulted in the abolition of slavery to some degree. Although some might say we had a civil war today. The law does not that animals have a right. In the first instance, going to be a matter of the law, where the law is going to recognize that animals have a right. The law lags behind. As I said yesterday, the law does not lead, the law follows. So it's only going to be when there's a social movement. It's going to be like with slavery. There were a lot of people who believed that human chattel slavery was wrong. And eventually, it resulted, in part, in a civil war, which resulted in the abolition of slavery to some degree, although some might say we had a civil war.
Por eso no es importante que nos centremos en conseguir leyes. Tenemos que conseguir personas que entiendan que está mal explotar a los demás animales. Ni siquiera conseguir personas, está mal lo que estoy diciendo, sino informarlas y que comprendan que es injusto considerar a los demás animales como un objeto que está a nuestra disposición. Solo con esto y con una sociedad que mayoritariamente piense de esta manera, se van a lograr leyes. Si no, hoy en día una ley no tiene ningún sentido, ninguno. Una ley de hoy que prohíba una explotación en específica, además de ser especista, porque está ponderando a una especie más que a otra, lo que está haciendo es siendo solamente temporal. No está viniendo a decir nada de si esa explotación o no prevalecerá en el tiempo. Una ley que se pone hoy puede ser quitada mañana, pero no podrá ser quitada mañana si tenemos una sociedad mayoritariamente vegana, y no la tenemos. Entonces debemos apuntar a una sociedad mayoritariamente vegana. Cuando tengamos eso, podremos avanzar en lo legal.
And I think that we're not going to change this. The United States Supreme Court ain't going to say, well, animals, we think that they're property and we think that they're persons under the Constitution and they have due process. That is not going to happen, particularly with this Supreme Court. It's not going to happen. It's going to happen as a result of a sea change, a cultural change, where more and more and more people stop thinking about animals as property and reject the idea of animals as property. That's when things will change. That's when the law will start to reflect that social sentiment. But it's never going to happen. Never ever going to happen. Lawyers are never going to do it. It's going to be the people who change, whose thinking changes, whose moral sentiment changes. The people's views will change, and then the law will follow. But if animals are going to matter, they can't be property. As long as they're property, then all they are things that we decide whether we value them a lot or we value them a little. Okay? So we need to recognize that if animals are ever going to matter morally, they have to have a right not to be property, and that requires that we abolish animal use. And that is why I think it is a very bad idea. Indeed, I think it is not just useless, I think it's counterproductive for the movement to be focusing on welfare reform and single-issue campaigns. Welfare reform is getting them bigger cages. Single-issue campaigns are like the anti-fur campaign or the anti-foie gras campaign or the anti-dog, the Yulin Dog Festival campaign, that sort of stuff. Those are single-issue campaigns. These things are not only a bad idea, they are counterproductive. Why are they counterproductive? Well, first of all, if it's wrong to use animals morally, if it's morally wrong to use animals, we ought not to be encouraging the idea that we ought to be exploiting them in a more humane way. If slavery is wrong, you don't advocate humane slavery, you advocate the abolition of slavery. If slavery is wrong, you don't advocate that the slave owner treats the slaves better, you advocate that the slave owners stop owning the slaves. And so the welfare reform and the single issue campaigns are really problematic.
Y acá no confundir ir contra quienes son hoy en día los dueños de los animales bajo explotación, en el caso de estas explotaciones mayoritarias, ¿sí? O sea, no tenemos que ir contra quienes producen injustamente en base a animales, tenemos que ir contra quienes generan la demanda, ¿sí? Eso es muy importante tenerlo en cuenta. No tenemos que enfrentarnos directamente con un explotador de animales, sino con quien crea la demanda para que ese explotador, que al mismo tiempo obviamente no es vegano, vea un negocio y lo lleve adelante.
They're terribly problematic. They encourage exploitation. How do they encourage exploitation? Well, think about it. If you have a large group, and the large group is promoting cage-free eggs, and then Walmart decides to sell cage-free eggs, and then the group puts out a thing, Walmart cares about animal welfare, and they're going to have cage-free eggs. What does that do? It tells the public that, go to Walmart and buy their eggs. It's like that Proposition 2 in California. Even before Proposition 2 came into effect, and it still isn't in effect, but when it technically came into effect, people were saying, oh, well, the animals in California are being treated in a much better way, so you can feel less guilty about using animal products in California. And the answer is, no, that's the wrong message. What that does is encourage people to think that animal exploitation can be done in a way which is morally acceptable. This is a really, really bad idea. And if you think about how these campaigns work by getting coalitions together. So let's say you've got a campaign focusing on foie gras or the Yulin Dog Festival. So you put together a coalition of people who, many of the people in the campaign, most of the people who are supporting the campaign will be meat eaters. And so they get together and they form, they become part of a coalition to oppose the Yulin Dog Festival because eating dogs is worse than eating cows, pigs, and chickens. The answer is no, it's not. It's terrible what's going on in China. But the Chinese, ragging against the Chinese is just an ethnocentric, xenophobic nonsense. The Chinese are they doing bad stuff to the dogs? Yeah. Have you ever been to a slaughterhouse? Have you ever seen what we do here in the in the civilized West that we think is, it's all done? It's not. I guarantee you, if you've never been to a slaughterhouse and you go to one, it'll blow your mind. It ain't like watching Earthlings. That's a brutal experience, but it doesn't stand in for actually being there. Trust me. Okay? It doesn't, you can't substitute a movie, I don't care how gory it is, you can't substitute for what it is to be there. And the best run slaughterhouses, the best run ones, those animals, it's hideous. And the treatment of animals from birth to death is hideous. So what you do is you end up having a coalition of people who think that they're better than the Chinese because those Chinese are doing really horrible things, and they're busy criticizing the Chinese while they're sitting around shoveling steak, chicken, ice cream, and everything else into their mouths.
Y además de lo alimenticio, participando en otras explotaciones también, ¿sí?
This is a problem. These campaigns are not only not helpful, they're counterproductive because what they're doing is encouraging people to believe that eating beef, eating pork, eating chicken, eating dairy, eating cheese, eating eggs is somehow a morally better act than eating dogs. And the answer is, no, it's not. The Chinese don't fetishize dogs the way we fetishize dogs. It's brutal what they do, but as I say, I had one guy write to me and say, well, you don't understand. I always love this. You don't understand. I just love that.
Y esto lo hacemos todo el tiempo, sin ir muy lejos, y analicemos las problemáticas que tenemos acá. Mundo Marino. Mundo Marino se reclama solamente porque la orca sea liberada y no se habla de los demás animales que están bajo explotación ahí. Y supongamos que una persona está en contra de todo eso y se choca con el movimiento animalista y la persona firma, dona, lo que sea, hasta se pronuncia, hasta hace una campaña, hasta puede ir a la puerta de esa institución a luchar por los derechos de esos animales. Pero no le vamos a cuestionar su participación absoluta en todas las demás explotaciones. Si somos veganos, ¿por qué rechazamos unas más que otras? No tiene sentido y por eso debemos promover veganismo. No queda otra si somos veganos.
You don't understand. They're trying to. The Chinese kill the dogs and they make them suffer. A lot of those dogs are alive while they're being slaughtered. And the answer is, I have been in slaughterhouses and I can tell you that I have seen many animals are conscious when they're being slaughtered. In order to keep a pig completely unconscious during the slaughtering process, you've got to apply the electrodes. They use these pads on the pig's head. And you've got to keep those pads on for at least 8 seconds so to keep the animal completely unconscious. Most of the time, or many times, what they do is they touch the pad, pig falls over, they put the chain around the leg, they pull the animal up, the animal goes to the kill floor, and the animal's becoming conscious when they're ripping into him. Chicken slaughterhouses are dreadful. Those animals, a lot of those animals are alive when they go into the scalding tank, which is why there's a lot of feces in chicken, because they defecate when they go into the scalding tank. So, this idea that the Chinese are really these barbaric people, that is just racism. That is nothing more. It drives me crazy when I see animal people talk about the Taiji dolphin thing. And, what they do with the Taiji dolphins is a really horrible thing. Have you ever been to an American rodeo? Have you ever, we do all sorts of stuff that is every bit as bad as what the Japanese do at Taiji. The difference is we fetishize dolphins more, and we also have an anti-Asian bias, and it's easy for us to discriminate against Asians. We've done it for a long time. And so
También hacemos esto y somos sexistas, por ejemplo, cuando condenamos a las pieles como peores que otras pieles. Por ejemplo, el uso del cuero, ¿sí? Se ha condenado a muchas personas por usar pieles de algunos animales como zorros y bisones, pero no se ha condenado, nunca he visto una condena a la misma altura por las pieles de las vacas, por gente que usa cuero.
So I think it's really, really important that we understand what these campaigns are about and why they are very, very, very harmful. And so, you know, and it makes, these campaigns make animal exploiters and the animal movement partners with each other. So you see, today I was somewhat unhappy to see Whole Foods here. Whole Foods. What the hell's Whole Foods doing at a vegan festival? I mean, you know, it's like Whole Foods. But you know what?
Tremendo eso. En la Vegan Fest, o sea, tiene el título de vegan, participa una asociación, una empresa que explota animales. Lo mismo podemos ver quizás acá en la Vegan Fest, no lo tengo bien presente, de quiénes son los que dan soporte o quiénes son los sponsors. Lo que sí puedo decir es que he visto que se apoyaba a los lunes sin carne, por ejemplo, en la Vegan Fest de acá de Argentina, porque está llevada adelante por la Unión Vegana. Tenemos que ser críticos con esto. La institución que habla de veganismo y que es referente involuntario, lamentablemente, o sea, es involuntario, no lo hemos decidido las personas veganas, quién es nuestro referente institucional, promueven el lunes sin carne, hablan de vegetarianismo en su página de internet. Es una locura.
I mean, they're big buddies with the animal movement, right? I mean, Peter Singer praises them, PETA praises them, Compassion Over Killing praises them, Farm Sanctuary praises them. Farm Sanctuary was involved in helping Whole Foods formulate their happy exploitation standards. So, as was Viva, a British group. So, I mean, what are they doing here? You know, you've got all of these groups that are forming partnerships with institutional exploiters. It's a really, really bad idea, okay? I see this all the time now. I see groups. I saw the Humane League here. I saw the Humane League. Humane League promotes the idea that empirical research says that we should promote, you know, vegetarianism and reducitarianism because that will lead, empirical research shows that will lead to veganism. There is one word for that characterization, and that is bullshit. Okay, and I hate to denigrate the feces of bulls, but that is complete nonsense. There is no empirical evidence, none whatsoever, that shows. I mean, I've read their stuff, I've read their supposedly empirical studies, and a first-year student taking a statistical analysis course or a survey course would recognize those studies or supposed studies for the nonsense they are. The organizations, whether it's the Humane Research Labs or Faunalytics or whatever, these are nothing but organizations which are supported by the large welfare groups which produce supposedly empirical evidence to show that animal welfare reforms work. They don't. There is no empirical evidence to show that they work. None whatsoever. You know? And look, I mean, put aside, if I were to say to you, look, you know, we got racism is a real big part of American culture, unfortunately still. And so let's deal with racism by having Racist Joke-Free Monday. Now, if I were to propose that as a campaign and say, you know, empirical studies show that, you'd say, I don't give a damn what the empirical studies show. That's a horrible thing to do. But this is what we do with animals. This is how we deal with the animal question. It's a really, really bad idea. But the bottom line is, just look at my notes here.
Es terrible lo que acaba de decir. No sé si coinciden con él. Un defensor de los derechos humanos no tomaría en serio ninguna medida de bienestar bajo la explotación de los humanos. Lo mismo debemos hacer como defensores de los derechos de los demás animales.
These campaigns are really problematic, and they really are speciesist. Because we would never promote these campaigns. We would never say, look, you know, 1 out of 4 women in America, by the time she gets to age 22, is either the victim of rape or attempted rape. That's pretty bad, I mean, when you think about it. And it's probably higher than that because that's what we know, okay? And women, rape is a crime which is, an attempted rape are crimes which are underreported, have always been. So let's just take the 25%. 25% of women are likely to be or have been victims of rape or attempted rape. It's a serious problem. Let's have rape-free Monday. Most people would regard that as obscene. I mean, if you suggested it, most people would say, would stay away from you and not want to be near you. But yet, we think that Meatless Monday is a good idea. No, it's not a good idea. First of all, when people aren't eating meat, what do? I mean, the egg industry is very happy. As a matter of fact, on Bob Linden's Go Vegan Radio, he had somebody from the egg industry who was saying that egg consumption has gone up because on Mondays people don't eat meat, but they ramp up on eggs. And actually, I mean, not that numbers matter, but the bottom line is you're responsible for more. The food which involves the most number of deaths per 1,000 calories is eggs. Okay, next to chicken, but chicken and eggs. But I mean, if you're eating eggs, you're responsible for a lot of chicken deaths because there are a lot of deaths that go into making eggs because they only use the hens for like 2 cycles and then they kill them all. And then when you talk about all the male chicks that are killed at the outset, if you look at the numbers of animals killed, the death rate per 1,000 calories is really quite high.
No es un problema de cantidad, vuelvo a insistir con esto, ni de cómo se dan los procesos, pero un uso es reemplazado por otro si una persona no es vegana. Eso es lo que tiene que quedarnos claro. Un lunes sin carne no nos garantiza que la persona el lunes no explote a los demás animales. Y al mismo tiempo, que no explote a los demás animales un lunes, pero sí lo haga el martes. ¿Está bien? No, sigue estando mal.
But Meatless Monday is a joke. Reducitarianism. Now all the groups are excited about reducitarianism, and the reducitarian people are going to be at what they call the Animal Rights National Convention. That is the wrong name for that conference that they have every year. It should not be called an Animal Rights Conference. It should be called the Happy Exploitation Trade Show, which is what it is. And so Alex Hershaft and his friends will be hosting Brian Cateman, who is a spokesperson or the spokesperson for the reducitarian movement. Well, I mean, that is just nonsense. This idea that, we discharge our moral obligations to people by exploiting animals on a reduced basis. So, that would be like saying, gee, I engage in racist acts, but I'm going to reduce them by 10%. Good. You're a good person. That's what you ought to do. You ought to reduce by 10% your racist activities. The answer is we would all see that for the nonsense it is. But because there's still speciesism lingering, we embrace this as progress. It's not progress. It's not progress at all. We need to move toward the idea of veganism not as a matter of reducing suffering. It is a way of reducing suffering. It's a very effective way of reducing suffering. But as a matter of justice. That it's wrong to kill animals, particularly when there is no reason to do so. When we're killing these 60 billion or 65 billion land animals and 1 trillion sea animals, we're killing them because they taste good and because it's convenient and because that's what we do. That's not a good reason. That's really not a good reason. And so I think we've got to move in the direction of seeing veganism as a moral imperative. You're either a vegan or you're engaging in animal exploitation. Those are the two choices. You give a multiple choice test, there is no C to choose. It's only A or B. You are either a vegan or you are engaging in animal exploitation. And we've got to, what we need to do as a movement, as a social justice movement, not this corporate charity movement, but as a social justice movement, is move in the direction of seeing veganism as a nonviolent act of defiance. We're saying no to the commodification of non-humans. We're saying no to the injustice of killing billions of animals every year for no reason. We are just saying no. We recognize this as a moral imperative. It's something we have an obligation to do. This idea that, we shouldn't insist on it. Farm Sanctuary recently has come out with a position, the Farm Sanctuary Outreach Director came out with a position saying, we really shouldn't insist on veganism because it upsets people, and what we ought to do is encourage people to eat beef instead of chicken because you're killing fewer animals.
Esto es una locura. Esto es una locura. Y estas son las ideas que nos bajan desde las grandes organizaciones, que no hablemos de veganismo. Entonces, ¿a dónde estamos llegando? A ningún lugar. Realmente estamos llegando a ningún lugar.
Think about if that's where we are, if that's, That ought to be clear to you people. It really ought to be clear. When you've got a movement where one of the big organizations is saying, eat beef, not chicken, come on. Then you either, well, if that's what appeals to you, that's fine. But it's not what appeals to me. And it's not right. And it is, in my judgment, obscene. It's an obscene sellout. But that's where we are. That's where the movement is. And so I think we've got to move in the direction of characterizing veganism as a moral obligation, as something that we need. It's the only thing, it's the only rational response to recognizing that animals matter morally is to go vegan. If you think animals matter morally and you're still eating them, then you don't understand what it is to recognize that someone matters morally. Because if someone matters morally, you do not treat them exclusively as a resource and sacrifice all of their fundamental interests for you. And that's what we do. We ought to stop focusing on vegetarianism. Vegetarianism is an incoherent moral position. It's absolutely incoherent. The idea that we draw this line between meat and other animal products is absurd. There's no, I mean, the animals used for non-meat reasons are treated every bit as badly, and then they end up in the same slaughterhouse anyway. I mean, you know, I actually think if somebody put a piece of steak in front of me and a glass of milk and said, you got to eat one or the other, or I'm going to blow your brains out, I would say, go ahead, I won't do it. But I would probably be scared. And which would I choose? Which would I choose if I were basing it on, I have to tell you, what goes into milk, the idea that people who care about animals drink milk or think that milk, cheese, or eggs, God, are better than meat. I don't know what y'all are thinking about, because I mean, it's like if somebody came up to you and said, well, I eat the meat from medium-sized cows, but I will not eat the meat from larger-sized cows. You would say, are you nuts? Why are you drawing that line? But that's exactly the line between meat and other animal products is as arbitrary as the line between, I will eat meat from brown cows, but not from black and white spotted cows. I mean, it's absurd. It's an absurd, and I think we ought to stop promoting vegetarianism.
Claro, y esas líneas arbitrarias están establecidas desde el movimiento. Desde el movimiento se dice que hay cosas que son peores que otras. Y sabemos que no es así, que todo uso es inmoral.
We ought to be clear. If you care about animals, you go vegan. It's that simple. And so, and look, I'm all in favor. I spend my life talking to people about going vegan.
¿Por qué además hay tanta gente vegetariana? ¿Por qué? ¿No será porque todo el tiempo estamos hablando de comer o no comer carne como movimiento animalista? Bueno, eso es una parte del veganismo. Si somos veganos no podemos centrar nuestro discurso en comer o no comer carne.
I do this all the time. Every day that I'm not... I train lawyers for a living. There's a special place in hell for me. I make more lawyers. But every day that I'm not teaching my students criminal law or criminal procedure or evidence or whatever, the other things that I teach, I'm out there talking about veganism. And I'm very patient. Somebody comes up to me and says, I can't go vegan right away. I always say to them, of course you can. I'll spend as much time as I have at that particular time and say, of course you can. And let me help you. By the way, I have a website called howdoigovegan.com, which I put together with a group of volunteers, just like normal people. People like, just people who volunteer. People like you that just came forward and said, I want to work with you. And, I said, fine. Let's work together. Nobody's making any money off of it. There's no donate button on it. We just give out information. And there will be no donate button on anything connected with me. And so...
Vayan y vean, revisen las páginas de las organizaciones más hegemónicas y grandes del país o internacionales y van a ver que lo primero que aparece es botones de donación. ¿Qué sentido tienen? Si lo único que tenemos que dar es la información de por qué es injusto explotar a los demás animales. ¿Para qué necesitamos dinero? No lo necesitamos, solamente para imprimir un folleto quizás, pero no es la finalidad de esos botones de donación que tienen todas las organizaciones, en el país y afuera también.
I'm all in favor of educating people, but I think we've got to be clear. It drives me crazy when I hear animal people talk about journeys, and they're on a journey. I'm on a journey, and think about how narcissistic and how speciesist that is. I mean, just think about that for a second. If I were to say, you know, I'm on a journey, I have heretofore believed that women are inferior, and I'm a misogynist and a sexist, but I'm on a journey, and I'm still engaging in sexist, misogynistic behavior, but I'm on a journey. We wouldn't say, oh, how wonderful, but when you get people, when you have people who are exploiting animals and they say, I'm on a journey, animal people get all weepy and they say, oh, you know, this is wonderful, you're on a journey, you're on nonsense. That is just nonsense, okay? It is going to be, you know, people always say to me, you don't understand. People are not going to go vegan overnight. Yeah, I know people are not going to go vegan overnight, but you know what? They ain't never going to go vegan as long as we're not being clear that they have an obligation to go vegan. I really believe that if we took the position, if you took all these groups and they all changed their tune tomorrow and they all started saying veganism is a moral baseline, it's a moral imperative, it's something we've got to do. If animals matter, we've got to go vegan. If we had all of these groups promoting this message in a clear way, we would have a vegan movement. We don't have a vegan movement because nobody is saying that veganism is a moral imperative. No one is saying it. They say it's a way of reducing suffering, along with cage-free eggs and crate-free pork and reducitarianism and all of these other things. So what we...
Realmente invito a que investiguemos esto, investiguémoslos en los perfiles de Instagram, en las páginas de las organizaciones. Veamos si hablan del veganismo como un deber moral, como lo único o la base para respetar a los demás animales. Si no lo están comunicando en estos términos, estamos en un problema.
What we've got to do is to be clear. And, you know, when I talk about unequivocal, clear vegan education, I'm not talking about going up and yelling at people. I'm talking about, look, going vegan is the most important form of activism you can engage in because it basically represents your statement that you are not going to participate in animal exploitation, that you are just saying no. But going out there and educating people in creative, nonviolent ways about veganism is activism, okay? And you know, Nelson Mandela said, education is the most important tool we've got to change the world. So there are all sorts of ways we can engage in creative, nonviolent vegan education. We can do it at all sorts. I mean, I talk about this in the stuff that I write about the various ways that we can do this. You know, we can table, we can go into, you know, we can talk to community groups, we can go into schools. There's all sorts of things that we can do to engage in creative, nonviolent vegan advocacy. But we've got to be clear. Veganism is the moral baseline. As long as people are eating them, wearing them, using them, then they don't matter morally. They just don't. So those people who accept that they do matter morally, we need to educate those people that they ought to be vegan and that they ought to educate people about veganism. And let me say this. There are a lot of people who don't care about animals. Well, I understand that. And so you're not really going to get very far with those people. But there are lots of people who do. Tons and tons of people who do. My view is everybody, you know, there's a lot of people out there who care about animals. Every one of them is a potential vegan. What we need to do is to educate those people clearly. Shut that dog up. I'm only kidding. And everybody who has a companion animal is a potential vegan. I mean, the number of discussions I have with people focused on their companion animal. You love your dog? Yeah, I love my dog. What's the difference between the dog you love and the animal you're sticking a fork into? That one question. I've had zillions of interesting exchanges with people. When I took the cab from the airport here yesterday, I landed in Greensboro, so I had a lengthy cab ride, and I got in the car with the guy. The guy said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, I'm speaking at this conference." And he said, "Oh, really? Tell me about that." We had a great conversation about veganism. I gave him a little ballpoint pen that says, howdoigovegan.com. We talked about the moral issues, the environment. It was an hour and 15 minutes. You know, we talked about the moral issues, the environmental issues, the health issues. The guy said, "Give me your email address. I'd like to talk with you more about this." You got me interested. Will he go vegan? I don't know. But, you know, you do this and not, you know, you do this every single day, as many times as you can. The odds are with you. You're going to get some people to go vegan. And so, you know, I mean, I talk at a lot of colleges and universities, and I talk to large groups of kids, and I talk to them really, you know, I mean, I go in there and say, you know, Michael Vick. Y'all know who Michael Vick was? Yeah, I know who Michael Vick was. Bad guy? Yeah, he's a bad guy. Why? It takes me between 3 and 6 minutes to get some kid to say he's a bad guy because he killed those dogs and he didn't have a good reason. I say, wait a minute, he had a good reason. He enjoyed watching them fight. Well, that's not a good reason. Why not? Because it's not a good reason. You know, entertainment, enjoying the pleasure of animal exploitation is not a good reason to exploit animals. Really? How many of you are vegan? And then 3 hands go. Well, I don't mean. I'm sorry. I will say, how many of you? It's okay. It's good. How many of you are vegan? 3 hands will go up, and then I'll say, wait a minute. I don't understand it. You all think Michael Vick was a bad guy because he inflicted suffering and death on animals and he didn't have a good reason. Then why aren't you all vegan? Because what's your reason? How is your reason any better than his reason? He liked watching them fight. You like the taste. What's the difference? And then a 1-hour discussion will turn in. And really. I mean...
Y así con todo, no sé si les pasa de hablar de veganismo en todos los lados posibles y bueno, esta es la vida que nos toca de acá hasta que terminemos nuestra existencia.
I do this all over the place. A scheduled 1-hour talk turns into a 3-hour talk, and every time I do that, I get, out of a group of 300 young people, I will get at least 60 kids who say, wow, I never thought about it that way before. You got me thinking about it. How many of those 60 kids? I don't know. Let's be conservative. Let's say 10. So 10 out of the 300 go vegan. I do that enough times, and building those numbers, because every one of those 10 kids, they got friends. And their friends have friends, and their friends have friends. And this is how we have a social movement. This is how we change things. We change things through incremental education, activist education. We can do this. But we got to want to do it, and we got to stop thinking that the way to deal with this is writing a check to one of these groups that's going to deal with the problem for us. The problem is ours, people. The problem is ours. It ain't somebody else's. It's ours. We aren't going to pay somebody else to solve the problem. We're going to solve the problem ourselves, and it's something each of us can do. Each of us can do at whatever level, Anna and I are working on a new book now. We don't have a title for it yet, but it's basically going to be how to talk to other people about veganism, and it'll sort of go with the 2 that we've done already, Eat Like You Care and Animal Rights: The Abolitionist Approach, because these are sort of intended to be general treatises for people to educate vegans about how to talk about veganism, as well as to get people who are interested in animals to see that veganism is the moral baseline and something that they're obligated to do. But I think, look, we've got to be clear about this. If we are clear about this, we can affect change. If we're not clear about it, we won't. One of the reasons why the animal movement has failed, and it has failed, I mean, at the level of the 501c3s, it has failed. And it has failed...
¿Qué es eso del 501c3? No entiendo nada, chicos.
Because it is not taking a position that veganism is the moral baseline. It is not taking that position. It's taking an ambiguous position at best, and some of these groups are taking actively anti-vegan positions. I mean, Farm Sanctuary, PETA to some degree, Mercy for Animals, Compassion Over Killing. These organizations are taking positions which are actually anti-vegan. I mean, when PETA gives an award to Temple Grandin, who is the designer of slaughterhouses, I mean, PETA gave her an award. What message does that send? I don't care how PETA explains that. I really don't. What message does that send to the public? I mean, the explanation that PETA gave is that she's helping to reduce suffering. Well, I have news for you. Slaughterhouses designed by Temple Grandin are also hell houses. They're places of horror, to put it mildly. I don't really care whether PETA gives her an award. They're terrible places. But what message does that send to people when PETA gives Temple Grandin an award? It says, well, PETA, if McDonald's promises to buy its meat from Temple Grandin approved slaughterhouses, that's somehow a good thing. That's the message it sends out. What message is sent out when Ingrid Newkirk, my old friend, I was with PETA, I was a volunteer lawyer, I never took money from them.
Increíble eso. ¿Sabían que Francione se hizo vegano por la presidenta de PETA, por ser amigos? Y ahora él es un férreo defensor del activismo independiente y de las no organizaciones. Es muy loco.
But I was a volunteer lawyer for PETA from the early 80s into the 90s when they first started. And my friend Ingrid Newkirk says on the Bell and Evans is a chicken producer. When Ingrid says on the website of Bell and Evans is showing how good animal welfare and good business go together. They're setting a new standard. Bell and Evans is setting a new standard for animal welfare. What message does that send? And when Ingrid says, oh, PETA doesn't believe in happy exploitation, I'm sorry, that's a lie. When you take the position that Bell and Evans chicken is a higher welfare chicken, you're promoting, when the head of PETA promotes Bell and Evans as producing a higher welfare chicken, PETA is promoting happy exploitation. That is why the movement's going nowhere. It's a business. These organizations want to keep the donor pools big. They don't want to offend anybody, so they don't want to talk about human rights issues because, hell, they might have conservative people who vote, they have people who vote Republican. They have people who are conservative. They don't want to upset them, so they don't take positions on human rights. They have people who are carnivores. They have people who eat all sorts of animal products but have dogs and cats and horses, and they don't want to offend them. So it's like, hey, we're Big Tent. Big Tent is shorthand for we've sold out. That's what it is. We've sold out. And that's what the movement's done. It's sold out. And you know what?
¿Coinciden en eso? Eso me parece fundamental comprenderlo. Me parece importantísimo verlo de este modo y yo creo que está en lo cierto. Mientras más gente haya dentro del movimiento que no es vegana, esto es como que termina perdiendo el sentido.
I'm not questioning the sincerity of these people. I know a lot of these people personally. I've known them, some of them, for much of my adult life. And I'm not questioning their sincerity, but I sincerely believe they are just wrong.
Ven, él, vuelvo a decir lo mismo, él fue amigo de Ingrid, no me acuerdo cuánto se llama, la presidenta de PETA, y él está seguro de que el enfoque de estas organizaciones está equivocado y están siendo contraproducentes para el movimiento. Y no tiene ningún reparo en decirlo, ¿sí? No tengamos miedo de denunciar lo que consideramos que es incorrecto para el movimiento, porque en esta causa no estamos involucrados nosotros, están involucrados los demás animales y a ellos estamos defendiendo. No podemos ser contraproducentes.
And I think that the economic incentives of running a group. You run a group, you need donations, you got to bring the money in to pay the employees and pay for all the benefits and pay for the rent and all that sort of stuff. And what you end up doing is selling out. It's never going to be a business. The revolution will not be tax deductible. It is going to be something that comes from us, from the people, from people who care about animals. We can make a difference. If we are clear about this, we can make a difference. And again, I'm not suggesting, I don't think you should be going up to people and becoming aggressive with them that when I talk about creative nonviolent vegan advocacy, I'm talking about the creative ways in which we can interact, communicate with people in productive ways. And there's all sorts of ways we can do that depending on the context. For example, the best way is talking to people in your community, because it doesn't really help to bring outsiders in to tell people in your community what the hell the right way to do things is. It's much better for you. It's much better for you to interact with your social circle, educate your social circle. I want to leave you with, look, in 1996, I wrote a book called Rain Without Thunder, in which I criticized the animal movement, and I said it was collapsing. The animal rights movement was collapsing into an animal welfare movement.
Ese libro es central y creo que deberíamos leerlo cuanto antes. Pero básicamente se habla de todo esto que se está hablando en esta charla.
I thought it was a really good book. Everybody got pissed off with me and stopped talking to me. And it is a really good book. But they got upset with me, and I stopped getting invited. Actually, the animal groups, I used to speak at all their conferences, and I stopped getting invitations. I really thought it was a really good book, and I thought it would spark discussion. I didn't understand that these groups are businesses. I didn't understand it the way I do now. These groups are businesses, and discussion imposes opportunity costs that they don't want to deal with, and so they got upset with me. And they stopped inviting. So I basically kept on writing books, and I was doing mostly professor sort of things in universities. And in 2005, some guy named Randy Sandberg, wonderful guy, from California. He worked at Apple at the time. And he called me up and he says, you've got to go online. You've got to get this stuff online. And I said, no, I don't like computers and I don't want to do that sort of stuff. And he said, no, you got to do it. And the guy drove me crazy. I mean, he literally called me day in and day out to the point where I was actually thinking about getting a restraining order against him. And finally I said, look, Randy, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I'll generate the content, but I don't want to deal with the computers at all. I don't understand that stuff. It's not, I'm just beyond the generate. I just can't. I'm too old. And so I said, but you deal with the computer stuff. I'll generate the content. He said, okay, what do you want to call it? And I said, I don't know. Let's call it the abolitionist approach, because I think of abolition as the central kernel of rights theory. And so he said, okay, we'll call it. So we bought abolitionistapproach.com. We set the website up, and it went crazy. Now I'm getting 300-400 emails a day from people. Okay, I will go home.
Yo le dije esto a mucha gente y se me cagaba de la risa. Es verdad, lo dice
I've been
él.
away 2 days. I will go home. There will be 700-800 emails. It drives me insane because a lot of them come from people in foreign languages, and I can't respond to them. I can't. But I've got people on my team. I've actually tried to get people on my volunteer team who speak foreign languages, so they'll respond in Spanish. I mean, some of the languages we don't. I have to say, Eat Like You Care is now in 13 languages, and it's getting out there. It's getting, it's in Romanian, it's in Turkish, it's in Spanish, French, Italian, etc. So, but it's gone crazy. The abolitionist approach has gone crazy, and all it is me, Anna, and a bunch of volunteers. Nobody's getting paid. There are no donate buttons, okay? All it is people who believe in veganism as the moral baseline, people who want to get out there. We got people tabling right now. On this Sunday, there are people tabling in countries all over the world, talking with people about veganism as a moral baseline. We've got them going to festivals and fairs and talking in community centers and schools, etc. And this is all a result of, a conversation I had with a guy from Apple and said, yeah, let's set up the abolitionist approach and let's go online.
Vayan a la página después, que está buena. Vean que no hay un botón para donar. Y también pueden visitar el canal de YouTube de Francione, que está bastante tirado, pero hay videos cortos muy interesantes, que hacen cambiar mucho la perspectiva de cómo vemos las cosas cuando entramos al movimiento y cuando estamos adentro cambia.
There are 80,000 people on my Facebook page now. Okay, and I have all sorts of discussions with them. Some of them come, and we have very interesting discussions about welfare. Some of them get banned, but look, I'm all in favor of civil discussion, but I'm not going to have uncivil discussion. Life is too short.
Algo que tiene muy malo Francione es que borra comentarios. Pueden, si quieren, mandarlo a la mierda en Instagram o en Facebook y les va a borrar los comentarios. No sé por qué hace eso, pero está muy mal.
So, the bottom line is we can do something here, but we've got to get away from this idea that animal welfare reform is a good thing. It's not. And let me leave you with one thought. Economics 101. Think about this for a second. If you've got a pig and the pig costs you $1, you buy the pig for $1. You want to bring the pig to slaughter. It costs you 50 cents to take care of the pig and get the pig to market. Well, that means you got to sell that pig for at least $1.50, or else you're going to lose money. So you got to sell the pig for at least a little more than $1.50 to make a profit. Somebody comes along and says, "Well, I want you to protect more interests of the pig." Well, that's going to cost you money. So you're a capitalist, and you basically say, "Look, if I can pass that along to people, I'll do it. But if I can't pass it along, I won't." So animal welfare reforms are limited by the fact that animals are property. Animal welfare reforms, the standard of animal welfare is never, ever, ever, ever going to rise above the level of what it takes to exploit an animal in an economically efficient way. It will always be low because it has the structural impediment of animals as property. So it can never be higher because then that would mean the demand would be decreased, and no one's going to force industry to do that. What you will have is Whole Foods here at the Vegan Fest. You're going to have Whole Foods catering to niche markets for affluent people who say, well, I've got more money, so I will go and I will choose level 5 torture and pat myself on the back and say, I am such a good person because I am buying level 5 tortured animals. But so you'll have niche markets, but that's all you'll have. Animal welfare is a dead end for the movement and, most importantly, for the animals. So the way they're doing it, and I don't care what the Humane League says, I don't care what Faunalytics says, it's nonsense. There is no empirical evidence it's going to work. We've had animal welfare now for in excess of 200 years. We're exploiting more animals now in more horrific ways than at any point in human history. It doesn't work. It's nonsense. We need to change the paradigm, but we cannot leave the important work to these businesses, because that's all they are. They're businesses. And they are now deeply embedded with the animal exploitation industry. You know, my friend Eunice Wong, who was here at this conference, she was showing What the Health last night, which is the follow-on movie from Cowspiracy. And Cowspiracy involves going around and talking to the heads of these environmental organizations and saying, why don't you care about animal agriculture, because it's destroying the environment. And all these environmental people don't answer, and they avoid answering and things, and everybody, and so really it's really embarrassing. You could make a movie like Cowspiracy about the animal groups. You could go around to all of the animal groups and say, why aren't you promoting veganism? And because they don't. Why aren't you promoting veganism as a moral imperative? Why are you partnering with exploitation industries? Why are you doing that? And the answer is because they're financially benefiting from it. And so I think it's time that we see that way of doing things ain't going to work. And the proof is in the vegan pudding. It ain't working. We need to change things. We need to change things dramatically. And the only way we're going to do that is we assume the responsibility. Can't stop. You got to stop writing checks to these organizations. You're better off taking that money and flushing it down the toilet, because at least you have there's a chance that it'll clear the pipes out. But I mean, giving money to these organizations is a waste. It's a waste. It's actually not. It's more than a waste. It's actually counterproductive, because what you're doing is paying for happy exploitation. Stop doing that. If you think animals matter, stop doing that. If you think animals matter, then understand one thing. This is our responsibility. It's the problem of the animals, but if we care, it's our problem. We can't relegate it to anybody else. There are no leaders to relegate it to. Each of us has to be a leader. Now I'll take some questions before I have to leave for the airport. Okay, thank you.
Bueno, ¿qué les pareció? Díganme ustedes qué les pareció. A mí me parece sensacional que se pongan estos temas sobre la mesa, que se discutan. Y nada, coincido en muchísimo. Coincido en que no tiene que haber líderes, que la causa está en nuestras manos como personas individuales, que las organizaciones son altamente objetables desde la teoría. Y que, bueno, cuando empiezan a pensar en los intereses económicos por sobre la causa o cualquier otro interés antropocéntrico, no solo pierden los animales, sino que estamos siendo contraproducentes. Así que, bueno, perdón por haberlos hecho ver este video con los subtítulos automáticos. Sé que muchas de las partes estaban mal, aunque no entendía bien qué era lo que decía, pero el eje central de la charla sí pudo ser mostrado y pudo ser analizado, y me parece que eso es lo importante extraer de acá. Y bueno, nos vemos en algún próximo episodio. Quién sabe haciendo qué cosa, porque ahora ya dejamos un poco de leer, pero igual tenemos muchísimo más que leer todavía. Pero debemos seguir siendo críticos de los espacios que comparten la lucha con nosotros, porque a quienes defendemos no somos a nosotros, sino a terceras víctimas que necesitan que tengamos en claro cuál es el objetivo y cómo llegar hacia él. Si participaste de algún espacio o participás y no te cierra, no tengas miedo en cuestionarlo y tampoco tengas miedo en salir. Al fin y al cabo, esto, como hemos visto, es un movimiento social que trasciende toda organización y que debe ser llevado principalmente e individualmente en todos nuestros entornos para poder transformar la sociedad. Así que bueno, muchas gracias por haber estado ahí y nos vemos en un próximo episodio.